So, first question is, in 2021, analysis of 185 million workforces worldwide, Rescue Time reported that employees could only actually complete 74% of their tasks during their time at work. So what this meant that only a quarter of the work has been done on their own time. So ultimately, outpost-based organizations that are looking to scale and pace aren't kind of being able to get the work done and completed in their own personal, and having to let their employees complete their work in their own personal time. So what I ultimately want to kind of find out is, how's everyone from your experience or within your organization being able to create an environment that ultimately ensures a really good, excellent work-life balance. So yeah, it'd be great to get some input on kind of how organizations or experiences from companies you've worked at have been able to combat the work-life balance issue that everyone does face.
Yeah, well, in general, if you're in a hyper growth situation with your company, and make no mistake about it, it will not always be a super healthy work-life balance, right? Let's just be honest. I think a good thing to do is just lead by example, right? You can have some initiatives, etc., but from my experience, the best, every manager in every team should lead by example, and yeah, basically be a best practice for their employees, right? And so what happens quite a lot, and I'm always laughing about this, is like someone texts you at 10 p.m. in the evening, but then writes like something like, please don't respond today, which is of course like bullshit, right? That will create a culture, it will create pressure to those people, right? So yeah, that is a first starting point. Don't do this, basically, right? Like stick to working hours, and be mindful of everyone else's time. I think that's what would work for me. And of course, you can have also initiatives within your company. We have a meeting-free Thursday, for example, where you block out all stuff and etc. Will everyone stick to it? Probably not, right? Like, but it's at least a starting point. But leading by example, I think probably is the most effective one. And yeah, that can really also come top down. If your senior leadership puts that out in the world and says like, okay, we're growing super fast, we need to be committed, etc., but we also need to be mindful, right? So if you work longer hours one day, please take time to do something else, log off, etc. I think that's more powerful than only having initiatives and not really having senior leadership behind it. But yeah, what are the others thinking of this?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry, Philip, I'll let you go.
In my opinion, I think it's a really, really tricky combination of two words. Actually, I don't like it at all, because I think your work should be your life also. I know what it means, and I know it's important to have like time off, and really you can shut everything off and take your time for completely something else. But what we are struggling as a startup with is you can't really be so flexible regarding work-life balance. You have to have people 150% committed to your vision, to your mission. Otherwise, you get kicked in the ass by the investor, and they will be like, hey, what's going on? You're not achieving the numbers we agreed on. So what I see, though, is in the society, the life part is more and more important these days, and people who are there as talents, they come with with a certain list, and they're like, okay, I want to work remote, I want to at least only work 30 hours, not work 40 hours, and all of this. So I think that the change will happen automatically, because the market is more towards the employee and not the employer. But I think the change is really, or it needs to happen in all different stake and shareholders. So the investor needs also to know that there is a change happening. You can't just always pedal to the metal and don't really care about people's private life. And then very interesting for, I guess, other companies who operate in different countries, when I was just visiting the US, the people in the US are always laughing about people in Europe, and they're always like, you don't really work, right? And I'm thinking like, I'm actually working quite a lot. So I think there's also a huge difference between different cultures. So I think this was the hardest and the most broad question to dive into, especially in the beginning. But I really like to hear other opinions as well, because for us it's a big struggle. And I like leading by example, but it's, as a founder, it's not always possible, to be honest. Yeah.
I think you've got a huge point there. I think that it depends on the organization, and that's why I guess it'd be good to get input from everyone really on this. And I think what's really interesting is kind of being open and transparent from the start, especially on the recruitment piece. Like when we speak to candidates from early days, if they say kind of work-life balance is a big thing that they're looking for, well, a startup that's kind of scaling up at speed isn't probably the right environment for them. So from a recruitment standpoint, that's something that we always try to kind of engage and get out of candidates early on, because there's no point of going into an environment like yourselves and
absolutely. We actually sell it more worse than it is actually, right? Just to be like on the safe side with this. So yeah, that's something we do actually.
I think Anne-Marie, did you have something to say as well?
yeah, I just want to mention that I don't know, at the end of the day, right, you sign up for a full-time contract, which is, let's say, 40 hours a week, and when it comes to work-life balance, you have to just make sure or just see where can you give some flexibility, how to arrange these 40 hours. But so I might challenge you a bit here, Philip, with like, you need to have people 150% committed for sure, but doesn't mean they have to work 150% of their 40 hours, right? So in the way of when it then comes to commitments that you gave to investors or to yourself or whatever goals you have, right? I think this is always comes down at the end to really setting priorities. And my experience here is that really working on these soft skills will help a lot if people really know, and especially also like leaders in the mid-management somewhere, because they get like pressure from top, pressure from down, you know, people complaining, and then like the boss comes around saying like, we're not reaching our goals, and really like also train these managers in the middle on that they know how to really set priorities for their teams, that they know how to really also lead by example, but also know how to really make sure that these 40 hours that you committed on a contract really being used wisely, right? So I don't know, for example, here at Get Press, we always just calculate with 36 hours, because we have like 4 hours will be gone with other things, like with maybe a coffee talk here or things that you other have, but like 36 hours are planned really on this working for this company or this customer or whatsoever, and already calculate a bit of time extra that will just be gone for other stuff that is still important, right? Like daily stand-ups, meetings, whatsoever.
I think that's a good point, right? It's not only about working hours, right? We need to also work smart, to be honest, right? And use our time very effectively. And especially in startups, you need to put a lot of time. But if you think a little bit ahead and build scalable stuff, automate, whatever, you can probably stick to a more healthy work-life balance if you invest a little bit in those type of things.
Sure, and I really think like we also should clearly communicate this to the employees and the candidates, right? You want to sign up for a full-time contract? Sure, then let me know what you need to arrange these 40 hours, because I also have the feeling what you kind of like mentioned, Philip, with this, like people come with like huge expectations of what they can get. Totally fine if we can offer this, but still let's talk about how you're going to just do your job. And I think to kind of like clearly communicate this from the beginning, and then say, right, you want to have your 40 hours working like this and that, or you need some time in between, and then just work on later hours, totally fine. So flexible working hours, other things they want to include so that they have like their work-life balance, how they see it, to make this transparent and discuss about this right from the beginning. So I think like clear expectation management is super important here.
And also what you guys mentioned, I think that's really important, to work output oriented, not time wise, like, of course I can always be like, hey, I'm so busy, and actually that's the feeling I get when you talk to people these days. Everyone says like, I'm so busy, I don't know what to do. But what you said, Christian, like working smartly and maybe having like a clear goal structure is very, very important, because our head of operations always says if that person cannot finish the goals in the 40-hour week, then something is completely off.
Yeah.
We really have to think about, okay, is the goal too high? Is the work process not efficient at all? Yeah. Don't we use the right tools? And I think that's a constant process, and especially in the beginning as a startup, you have no idea what you're doing. Like you're constantly improving.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but thanks a lot for the input. Really helpful.
Thanks for everyone for that. So yeah, I guess we've covered that quite well there, and we'll come on to the next question now, if that's okay. So, and it's quite related, to be honest. So from our experience, we've seen firsthand how important agility is within the recruitment process when attracting talent. So time is really crucial. So it'd be great to get experiences on how you've done this in previous companies, well, I guess how either your previous companies or your current business or experience could talk through some of the examples, how you've done this well and perhaps not so well. So your advice in really keeping candidates engaged throughout the process. Obviously, I appreciate every organization's recruitment process can be long, it can be short, but how do you kind of keep candidates kind of engaged if it is a longer process? Has anyone got any input in terms of kind of what they've done well, what they've not done so well? Any initiatives around this would be really great.
So I'm not 100% sure if I understood the question correctly, but yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of ways how you can make it more effective, your recruitment process. I think one obvious for tech is automated assessment. That's something we always have been looking into, like platforms like Codility, etc., to bring time down. Sorry, my son. And then yeah, we work with SLAs with the business to keep speed. But more high over, I think it's creating a culture of recruitment, right? Like where everyone knows that this is a priority for the business at the moment, right? If it isn't, you also don't need to be fast or right? You can optimize your processes for quality, for example, right? But if it's a priority to bring in talent fast and scale it very quickly, then you need to optimize the processes, right? I would say.
Has anyone experienced that, obviously, when kind of the product or the solution that the business is offering is also a priority, but scaling is also a priority as well? There's a business that we've worked with recently where kind of you've got kind of the talent team needing kind of time from engineering managers to take interviews, but then it's the battle between kind of the engineering managers needing time to actually work on the product or the solution.
Well, that's always the challenge, right? But it really comes down what is the bigger priority at the moment. Because if you're in hyper growth, usually your productivity goes down quite dramatically if you're building products, right? So if the business is fine with doing that, but then having a higher output after the scaling phase, then yeah, that can be a goal, right? If it's the other way around, it's also fine, but it needs to be clearly defined, I think, right?
I honestly think it's a big trust thing too. If you trust the first gatekeeper to only let the ones through who are basically worth talking into a second interview, then definitely there should be time for it. And also I think what really helps the recruit is if you are very transparent and open from the first talk, from the first moment. I always tell them, this is our process, this is what you go through. If you need feedback quicker than, let's say, 3 days, what we have in mind, let me know, because nothing is worse than both wanted it and at the end you didn't end up together because one of them wasn't talking. So I think you have to have a certain flexibility, and if there is someone you really want, the timing in the recruitment process shouldn't be an issue. Like, I think you also have to make sure from a recruitment point of view. I always have to tell my co-founder, I'm like, hey, I really want that person, and I need you to talk to that person now. And then they know. So
That's a good one, yeah.
Those are
No,
the
but
kind
yeah,
of clients
thinking
we
of,
like to work with.
but thinking about the touch points with the candidates is a very important exercise, right? And if you're doing at bigger scale, I think that's very important, right? Like, how many times do we want to touch base with the candidates, and in which way, and yeah, those type of things. And you can also solve a lot by coordination function, for example, to look at the candidate experience and those touch points. But in general, you just need to define it basically, right? Like, okay, what are we trying to do here? And yeah, that's what Philip just mentioned, right? Creating or yeah, managing expectations and then being very transparent about it. Will it always be happening? I don't know. There will always be challenges with it, but at least having a guideline and a framework for it is a good starting point.
Definitely. I think the candidate experience just does improve, but it's so easy just to kind of the candidate experience improves for a while and then kind of business kind of changes. So yeah, definitely it's something that strategy and process just needs to be maintained over a period of time, keep being reviewed as well. I think it's really important as well. So yeah. Anyone else, any other inputs on this question? I think you might be.
Also, what we do at Marley Spoon, and I think it's quite controversial in a way. So when I joined, I was shocked. For a long time, I was the only recruiter, and we still don't have recruiters because we believe in a kind of a tier approach where all the power of recruitment is being given to the hiring managers and team leads. So our founder and CEO does not want to kind of outsource the importance of recruitment to recruiters. So he wants to make sure that the team leads keep the entire accountability of recruitment, and that should be their number one priority at all times, to build the best teams. And it's easier because then we don't rely on, like, each team is responsible to recruit for themselves. Some do get some support, for example, tech. That's why for tech we had an exception. But ultimately, we feel it's working very well, and they're moving fast because they need those people. It's burning, and the faster they recruit, the faster they have them on board. So not relying on a recruiter to do the heavy lifting and to do everything for you, but having to do it yourself automatically speeds it up because you want to get it done.
Really interesting approach. Yeah, no, I've never.
Yeah, I heard that also from other companies, and it can work in a smaller environment. I think it really gets challenged if you look at bigger numbers, right? I think because then it will take most of the time of the engineering departments, for example, to scale their own teams, and then yeah, the trade-off might be too big for a company, right? That's
yeah, I agree.
I
so that's why in engineering we do it with a recruiter, but also in other departments, as we're growing quite big now, it's a challenge. So it can be chaotic at times. I'm not saying it's the perfect solution, but it's a way.
But the ownership is really great idea, right? So having that and actually going from that to a more mature recruitment organization is probably a good starting point, because you already have the buy-in. The business knows how recruitment is done, etc. So driving that change can actually work quite well. I would say it's a good fundament, probably.
I just think I mean, I don't know how big Marley Spoon is, but it's not a small company anymore, right? So I think it's just, it shows a bit of, I don't know, I wouldn't say disrespect, but a bit like, all right, everyone can do recruiting. It's nothing, you know? So, and it actually is a whole profession, and there aren't, it's not without a reason that there are professional recruiters who know how that job is done. And it's totally fine if a small startup is recruiting and on their own, and if the founder is sitting here and trying to build his team. But in a big company like Marley Spoon, I'm a bit shocked because it doesn't really show a lot of appreciation for recruiting. I think if it's just something that is every team lead can do it on the side.
It's a very good way to look at it. I fully agree. Yeah, we offer training and all of that, but it's just kind of all the team leads have an additional job on top. They're wearing two hats at all times.
I quickly want to share one experience from my previous employee. I worked for Netlight. It's the Swedish IT consultancy. And they have 3 core functions in their company from the beginning, since 1999 when they were founded. And the 3 core function is the IT consultants, talent search or talent management, and engagement search and engagement management. So engagement search is basically like sales. They're looking for new projects for the consultants. The consultants are working in the certain IT teams directly at the client. And talent search, their job is continuously bringing in new talents. And all 3 core functions have the same salary. So I really like that, because they realized from the very beginning their product are their people. And if you don't have that mindset by now, I think you will have big trouble in the future, because the market is for the talents. Like, they can choose. If you're good in what you're doing, you're the one choosing. And if you don't pay the people a good amount of appreciation and a good amount of salary, I think, who are recruiting for you, and if you don't give them a voice, basically, I think then something is off. So I think I was very happy to had that experience before founding my own company, because now I can always tell my 3 other co-founders, I'm like, hey, this is the most important thing for us. So
that's what everyone says, right? All the founders will tell that people is the most important in the business, right? But it's sometimes get stuck at that level.
yeah.
Good to hear.
But interesting, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much for that. We'll jump into the next question around diversity and inclusion. So a study by Gartner found that inclusive teams improve team performance by up to 30% in high diversity environments. And speaking with our network, D&I is a really kind of hot topic. We get a lot of people asking advice around this area. So my question is, how have you helped foster a culture that supports like inclusion and diversity in the workforce? Not an easy question. I do appreciate that.
Like, everyone's quiet.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to hear this.
Oh, sorry.
No, I wanted to say everybody wants to hear what are the opinions outside.
Yeah.
Well, it's something that we do a lot of at Transition Partners. We work with our clients, and we run kind of blogs, and we have different events where we discuss D&I issues. And it's a really good way to kind of put it into the forefront of people's minds, just to make sure that people are aware of diversity and inclusion and what issues might be happening in organizations, because sometimes the awareness is what we need to just make sure that we are kind of, not making any mistakes accidentally sometimes as well. So that's something that we certainly pride ourselves on here.
Yeah. So at my previous company, which most people in Berlin will know as Lieferando, so we had programs around diversity as well. And that ties into what you said, is creating awareness, doing trainings for biases, etc., in interviews and those type of things is certainly something you can do and helps. But again, this is the institutionalized area, right? And you also need, again, the other side, which is leadership involvement, and really buy into this topic, right? Because otherwise it will only be stuck on that level, right? You do training, but no one really cares about it, right? That's more what I think. So if everyone in his own team, etc., drives that to a certain degree, and that's what I usually do when I hire for my own teams, is like, okay, I think it's important. I know that we need diversity, and I'm not only talking about, I usually talk about this topic more, diversity in experience, in background, and those type of things, rather than like gender or nationality or those type of things, right? So yeah, I always try to have a healthy mix of experiences and backgrounds. But yeah, if you do that, I think that if everyone would do that, then we already would have a better place in the workforce, I would say.
That's it, isn't
That
it?
leading from example is again a really good
Yeah, I'm
point.
sorry to repeat myself.
It's very, very relevant. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's something we try to do when we speak to a lot of our clients. Is something that we raise, and we just make sure that kind of everyone, if it's not thought about, it's thought about kind of at the start. And I think then we've seen people kind of definitely making a changes on things that we've kind of inputted. But yeah, it's just a slow process. I think sometimes issues don't get sorted until kind of there is an issue.
That's what I mean, right? You can wait years and years until the organization is basically ready to roll out. And when I left JustEatTakeaway.com, we just hired a director for diversity and inclusion to run all those programs, etc. But you could already, like 3 years before, do your own thing in your department, in your area, in your team, etc. Right? So yeah, that's how I feel about it. You don't need to only wait for the institutionalized setup and the big programs. You can drive change every time, everywhere, basically.
Definitely, these conversations are really important. It's just making sure everyone's having these conversations from the start, which is ultimately the best.
And there will be, in every business, be champions around this, right? Because a lot of people care about those topics. So it's just identifying those champions and giving them some flexibility and space to speak up, to share best practices, etc. And then you can still have the big programs and the top-down numbers and KPIs, like, okay, we want to commit to these numbers, etc. Yeah. But yeah, that's rather forcing an organization to become diverse rather than having people driving it, right?
That's a great idea, because some people will love to have that extra responsibility as well, and it'll give them a piece of work that they can take ownership of. So
when we run pool surveys within our teams, this is probably most of the stuff that comes. If we ask them, like, what are you super passionate about, what you want to see, it's most of the times the diversity and inclusion, belonging, all those areas.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks very much for that. Perfect. We'll come on to the next question then. So the next question is, the term career progression isn't just about milestones we set over time in terms of promotion and career migration. It's also the ongoing practice of learning and growth, which gives us the skills to succeed in long-term and short-term career goals. So it'd be interesting to hear kind of what ways that you support employees professionally and in their personal development throughout the kind of them working for you. What ways in the past have you been able to kind of support your employees, not just kind of in the kind of typical kind of hitting their milestones?
Maybe the HR specialist can go first.
Yeah, I mean, what we do here at Get Press is mostly, I mean, we have a lot of like young professionals, like working students, trainees, juniors, and really giving them like certain training to really develop like the technical skills, so to speak, so really what they need for their professional work, but also trying to offer different things. So we're, for example, working together with self-OP, so that's something for like mental stress and everything. So like also trying to give certain possibilities to, maybe that's not really development, but you know, like also on their personal skills to develop there more. And also I mean, I've just been here for a week now, but also already deciding that we basically have to also focus more on general skills like communication, how to organize yourself. So really like these more or less soft skills that you need in whatever job you're ever going to do in your life, right? To focus on that more in the future, but that's nothing that we have set up yet.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. Thanks for the input there. Perfect. Something we've noticed in terms of kind of the career progression side, and it's something that's raised quite a bit, is like the educational budget in terms of understanding actually what people kind of want to develop on from the start. So when someone comes in as a new hire into the business, really understanding kind of what their kind of like development kind of values are and what they kind of want to get out of the position there. So I think it's really important from understanding from people when they join the business kind of what their kind of plan is as they go along, and hopefully then kind of coming up with an action plan of how you can do that, whether that's kind of the educational budget you have or kind of more at a kind of personal level. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is people really admire and like when they kind of come into a company and they're already kind of asking what things can be done from the start and what they want to achieve in the position or within the company as well.
I used to work in a company called Infosys. So it's one of the leading company in India. So there we had a career progression chart per se. So suppose I join as a SSC, like a senior software engineer. So within 2 years, I would be promoted to, I mean, if I complete 2 years with that kind of ratings, I would be promoted to a TA role. And there was a proper guidelines like how to achieve your next target. So all that was actually properly set there. So that actually in one way helped a lot of employees to know like how is their career progression going to be and what are the different goals they have to achieve that. And also what are the ratings that they would have to achieve. And there was also a path for fast growth, like people who are in the fast growth career path, right? Suppose you get that's a top rating. So you can reach those goals in a much faster way. Suppose if it is 2 years for a career growth from one goal to another one, probably if you're a top performer, it would reduce to 1 year or 1.5 years. So that way, it was quite well set up there. Yes.
Just on that structured approach, by the way, how did people like feel with that? And obviously that's very, very structured. Was the feedback good with that, or they were what?
Actually, we were forced to do that because the company size was almost 250,000, 3 lakh employees in the entire organization. So I used to handle employee strength of 2,000 employees.
Oh, I think we've lost you a little bit.
Your audio is quite low.
Fade it out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
I'm so sorry. The organization itself was quite huge, actually. So almost right now, when I was there, they had almost 2 lakh employees, and right now they are like 3 lakh employees. And the growth of the organization itself is not very fast.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of stagnation of the career growth. It is not like every 2 years an employee gets a promotion or a progression, even if he meets those set goals. So even though it is one way that all the structure in place, actually, if you see, it also creates a lot of issues because people, when they reach those goals or they've completed 2 years and then they don't get that promotion or the progression, the frustration sets in.
Yeah.
So that is there. And also there is one more issue. There was like, there is a level called 6A, like that is the top level. And after that is the management. The 7 is the management roles. So a lot of employees or a lot of employees come and reach that ceiling at 6A, like the senior project manager or a senior consultant kind of role. And after that, they are not able to go higher. So that they hit the ceiling and the organization structure has become almost like a inverted pyramid. Not an inverted pyramid per se, but yeah, it's become like instead of this kind of a structure. So yes, you can put all those things in place, but yeah, if the organization is not growing fast enough, if you are not having the business growth, bound to have problems. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think one more thing to add is what I've found is quite helpful is defining competencies per level and function, right? So at least people know what they should work towards to, right? And then enabling them, whether it's an individual budget or coaching, etc. And yeah, I think again, every manager needs to be very close with their employees. I, for example, do monthly check-ins where we do retrospective on the months and see if they achieved certain things, if they're happy with their progress, etc. And then we can even discuss moving them outside of the role into different roles, etc. if they're not happy with the current setup, etc. So that's something, yeah, on a lower level without having big programs, you could do.
Definitely. And just
And also,
sorry.
a trend that I see is that people don't really grow into roles, or from a career ladder perspective. It's more, you develop a skill library, a skill kit, and then you can just jump departments, jump teams, jump roles, because it's not going to be so specific anymore. Very soon, we're not going to have job ads for specific jobs, rather maybe job ads for specific skills. So it's going to be a bit more freedom and more opportunities to change roles without having to go through this very specific career ladder.
Yeah, having that in an organization that you can basically go from point A to point C without going to point B is very important, right? Like having that flexibility. And I see that happening sometimes more effectively than other times. But yeah, I think especially in startups and scale-ups, I spoke to our chief expansion officer a few weeks back, and he's in the business for 2 years, and he already had 6 different titles and roles within the company, right? So maybe that's an extreme, but at least it shows that the organization is very agile in looking at skills and looking at what can people do actually in the business without looking only at titles, etc. Right? So
exactly.
I think what is also really a trend, and where I'm also not sure on actually how to deal with it, but it's like I get more and more the feeling that especially young people, you know, they're not most of the time not even have passed their probation period, but they were like, oh, I did now everything once, I understood how the things work, so now give me something else. And I'm always like, how about you to just do your job, you know, what you get hired for? And so it's really a challenge of like, okay, great that you understood everything now. So I have the feeling like people constantly want to have new things, new titles, new roles, new challenges. Oh, I worked on that customer and company now for 2 months. Give me a new one. Like,
I see that with young people as well.
It's
actually,
really crazy, you know. They have like these certain expectation of constant change, and it's super hard to keep them satisfied with giving them new stuff every time, and you're just being like, yeah, you understood how it works, but now just do it, you know. So I don't know, it's really challenging.
That's a really interesting point.
No, that's a really good point. I also see that with more younger people. They don't want to go the routes that like all the generations went through. Like you put in the work, you do something for a certain time, and then you progress, right? That's a concept from the past almost, right? Like,
and it's a culture of overstimulation, right? We need something new constantly. Yeah.
That's really good.
And they're quite demanding also. I mean, as soon as they reach a milestone, they want it. I mean, they are not ready to wait also. I mean, that's what I saw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. What's quite interesting is that's coming on to one of the other questions that I'll probably jump to now, is kind of the feedback side of it. So as we know, feedback's really essential to growth. So how has everyone acknowledged kind of employees' success and really being able to encourage open and honest conversations for actionable feedback? I think through obviously lockdown, it's very different, kind of the remote side of it, but and I think that was quite a big thing that was raised. But in feedback with employees, how people continue to be able to kind of make that an important feature in the business.
We in HR, we had this issue because generally when managers used to give feedback, I mean, they would give very, very vague feedbacks while coming to candidates, even if the candidate's performance is not up to the level of what is expected for that role. But when, because that would create an issue at a later point in time when there would be issues with the performance management in that area. So yeah, I mean, I would say like be more specific, be more number driven, and give feedback that can be measured. I mean, tomorrow if candidate comes back to you and asks you questions, you are able to justify why you have given that feedback or why you have given that rating. sorry, I'm talking from a more HR point of view. I don't know if it is relevant to this conversation, but yes, giving feedback has to be more numbers driven, and which can be measured also, is what I feel. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Perfect. Is anyone use any type of tools or any kind of initiatives to kind of drive the feedback as well? I know there's tools on the market for these types of feedback loops, or is there anything that anyone's used there?
Use Slack for it. We actually, I think we really drive feedback as soon as we recruit someone and the person starts, we give feedback after a week, after a month, after 3 months, after 5 months, just before ending of the probation period, and then we continue in each quarter, and we do a bigger round of feedback every half a year where we collect it from each and every person they had been in contact with in the organization. I think that's really important in a small group. Like we are 20 people right now, it's easy. But if you have more people, then of course it gets a little bit harder, and definitely a tool other than Slack makes sense for it. But we collect it and then we give it anonymously if they wish for being or staying anonymous, and that really it's like kind of like a degree you get every half a year, and you're like, okay, this is what I achieved and this is what people thought about me, and everyone really values it, and it's also easier to give critical feedback in that way, because you can always be like, it's anonymous. It wasn't me. So I really like that process, and I got great feedback about this process. So
really great. And does that, what in terms of kind of larger organizations, be interesting from like Julia, your point, how is kind of feedback used within your company?
Sure. There's a dog outside. I hope you don't hear that.
We do.
Oh, sorry, my neighbors. So there is indeed, feedback is just such a big topic. We're running a few trainings at Marley Spoon, and I think probably one key element that stood out for me was it's a 5-to-1 ratio. So 5 positive feedbacks and 1 constructive feedback. And that should not be given maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months. It has to be continuous all the time. And how we do it, we have this in HRIS integrating into Slack. We have a celebration channel, and people constantly post their everyday celebrations, appraisals, thank you for this, thank you for that, giving a lot of positive feedback, that's really motivating. And then when the time comes that you also receive maybe something more constructive, of course, not in a public channel, but maybe in a performance conversation, it's easier to digest that, as also was mentioned before. So I think when feedback is mentioned, everyone freaks out because you will think about the negative to constructive one. The feedback should always be the positive one all the time. And another emphasis that we're trying to something else that we're focusing on right now is also teaching people how to receive feedback, because it's not only about giving, it's also about knowing how to receive, not to take it personally. So give feedback, you have to be open enough to receive it and to know how to digest it, because it's already hard enough for the person giving the feedback. Let's all be more mindful that we also have to know how to receive it. So that's also another element worth mentioning.
Really like that. I like kind of developing that company culture on feedback is super important. The training aspects around that, and looking at feedback as a positive thing apart from just being negative. I think that's super important. Well, I think we're just running out of time for the next question now. So we'll probably wrap things up, but thank you so much everyone for joining today's session. I hope that I've learned a lot, so I hope that everyone else has picked up a few initiatives and ideas, and hopefully can take that back to the businesses or your teams.